Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today I'll be discussing Narsil. Now, Narsil is a sword from Lord of the Rings, obviously. When we first see it, it's shattered and broken. Having been shattered, the great battle against Sauron in the War of the Last Alliance, its history is one that is rather interesting. There's a lot to the meaning of the name, but as to the sword itself, thematically is akin to how Luke Skywalker's lightsaber works, the one of his father from episode 3. And then he gets his episode 6 lightsaber. But you've also got, for example, Kyle Katarn, who loses his only to get one of Jarek's followers' lightsabers. Now, I mention this because the idea of the broken sword forged anew is an old idea in literature. It goes back to King Arthur, of course, when the first Excalibur is broken and then he has to get a new one from the Lady of the Lake. So now that we've got the thematic inspirations and later successive versions out of the way, I think that it's time to get to the history. Narsil was forged by Telkar, one of the greatest smiths of the first age of Middle-earth. And Telkar learnt from Gamil Zirak, and he was one of the greatest, save for only Feanor and Celebrimbor. He forged the knife, Ingrist, and Narsil together, as well as the dragon helm of Dorlomin, which was worn by Turin Turambar. We don't know much else about Telkar, but he's from Nogrod, which something that's always confused me is how nobody ever seems to mention that Nogrod sounds like Novgorod, Russian city founded around 859 AD. This is an old Nordic foundation, but it just strikes me as very strange that the names sound so similar, and yet nobody's at all interested in this linguistic connection. I don't know if it's just that it's too obvious for people. As to the sword, it's said to have been forged in the deeps of time, and it's interesting because Telkar also forged a great many other swords for the armories of King Thingol in Menegroth. In the First Age, the sword didn't see much use, but the sword seems to have been given to possibly Elros as a gift, and Elros would pass it down for his family. This is where it's not clear how it came to be owned by the Lords of Andunier, but I would posit that the sword was a marriage gift. It was Silmarillion's dowry when she married her husband, Elaton. It came to be passed down through the family as the principal arm of the Lords of Andunier. Naturally, the sword would be used by Elendil, and it seems that in his position as heir to the lordship of Andunier, that Elendil was given the sword. Likely this was because Amandel had grown old and was not expected to survive his arrival in Aman. But this was the main weapon that Elendil used when he teamed up with the spear-wielding Gil-galad to take down Sauron, with the two dying ere Sauron's defeat was finalized. With the handle shard of Narsil, Isildur secured Sauron's defeat, cutting the One Ring from Sauron's hand. Now, the shards, though, were all gathered up by Isildur, who took them with him, and Narsil would be given over to Isildur's squire, LotR, who sounds rather like Otter from Norse mythology, an alternative name to Odin. There's quite a bit of an implication here, I guess. And Isildur would command LotR to escape, which LotR did, and took the shards to Rivendell, where they were passed down to the next king, Isildur's son, Valandil, with Valandil having been the only surviving son of Isildur. The shards of Narsil were passed down through the generations, but none of the Dunedain of the North were to really use it because it was broken. In time, they were to come into the hands of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, who would have the blade reforged, of course. Narsil's name in Quenya means red and white flame, from Nar, fire, and Thil, which means white flame, symbolizing the sun and the moon. Narsil's position as a flame here, it's rather like fire, because hope is often compared to fire. And in that regard, thematically, one could say that though the weapon was shattered, and with it the hopes of the men of Westernessy lost their hope, there was still a spark of it left that was passed on from generation to generation until it reached Aragorn. As to a white flame, white suggests purity, fire, of course, suggests warmth. heat and hope. But there's also a Judeo-Christian symbolism here, as it's said that in the story of Moses, there was a branch, or at least a small tree, that was burning with a white fire, and that this was the physical manifestation of God when he approached Moses to speak to him. It's a rather peculiar tale. So there's a touch of the divine here. I think we're supposed to read into it that this is a bit of the divine's will. That when Isildur cut the One Ring from Sauron, this was the destiny of Isildur made manifest. There's a lot of connotations with purity when it comes to Isildur, given the white tree and the white flame here. Isildur was supposed to remain pure, but didn't. He was blemished. And in turn, Aragorn's discovery of a seedling for a new tree and his reforging of the white flame sword, we have to read into that Aragorn is also pure in a way. These are a lot of connotations. Now, Narsil also had an alternative name. In other writings of the Legendarium, it was supposed to be named Branding, which a branding iron is what likely comes to mind, with branding irons often used to punish criminals or slaves. So obviously, this is supposed to be Providence, the sword of Providence in a way, being wielded against the wicked Dark Lord and his armies. Narsil, though, is also in a way supposed to be inspired, I think, by the sword of Sigmundur, which was later reforged by Sigurdur. Sigurdur would reforge it with a dwarf's help, one who later betrayed him. It's said that after the sword was reforged, it was able to slice through the anvil upon which it was recreated. Obviously, Tolkien was looking to Nordic and even Anglo mythological ideas. This is where, in turn, though, the weapon has been connected with Aragorn's own destiny in a way by the Red Book. Red Book has suggested that as the line was broken, in a way, the men of Westernessy became broken after the fall of Elendil, and that from then on, there was something off about the line of Isildur, and that it's only made anew and properly recast and brought together by Aragorn, who reforges it, and that this is in a way the dynasty reforging itself, recasting itself, and rebuilding itself in the person of Aragorn. And that thematically, Narsil is in a way an extension of Aragorn. All I can comment on that is I've got nothing to add. I also like the mythological connotations, and I think that there's another one. Narsil is also a representation of Isildur, because it was a pure sword. It was pure, unbroken, perfect. Isildur can be seen in this kind of light, but then the moment the One Ring came into his possession, he was blemished, his fire tainted. The Conan the Barbarian movie suggests, or a piece of steel being a physical manifestation of a wielder's will, Isildur and his line's will was broken, and Aragorn's was not made pure until the reforging of the sword. There's a lot of themes to read here, and too many to capture in so short a video as this one. But in the future, at some point, I'm going to follow this video about the sword that was broken with one about Anduril, the reforged Narsil. I hope you don't mind the slightly rambling tone to this video and the focus on some of the themes and mythological precedents and on some of the metaphysics of it. I did promise to do the history of the sword, but I wanted to elaborate on other ideas and kind of just semi-wing it and discuss aspects of the blade that fascinate me. I don't know if this video will be popular or not, but I do hope that if you enjoyed it and you haven't yet, do smash that subscribe button as though you were Sauron trying to smash Gilgalad into itty-bitty pieces.